Good morning, everyone. It is just after 10 a.m. in the East, and we are coming on the air to bring you live coverage right now. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, she's going to be taking the next step of impeachment, naming managers. Let's take a listen.
And as you know, I reference temporal markers that our founders and our poets and others have used over time to place us in time, to emphasize the importance of time, because everything is about time, how we use it, how we mark it. And today is an important day, because today is the day that we name the managers. We go to the floor to pass the resolution to transmit the articles of impeachment to the Senate, and later in the day, when we have our engrossment, that we march those articles of impeachment to the United States Senate. As I've said, it's always been our founders when they started, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary, when. Abraham Lincoln 7 years ago. Thomas Paine, these are the times that try men's souls, the times that found us. Again and again, even our poets. Longfellow. Remember, listen, my children, and you will hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere on the 18th of April in 75. Hardly a man is now alive that remembers that famous day and year. It's always about marking history using time. On December 18th, the House of Representatives impeached the President of the United States, an impeachment that will last forever. Since December 18th, there have been comments about when are we going to send the articles over. Well, we had hoped that the courtesy would be extended, that we would have seen what the process would be in the Senate. Short of that, that time has revealed many things since then. Time has been our friend in all of this, because it has yielded incriminating evidence, more truth into the public domain. Since we passed the articles, on December 20th, 2 days later, new email showed that 91 minutes after Trump's phone call with President Zelensky, a top Office of Management and Budget aide asked the Department of Defense to hold off on the Ukraine aid. On December 29th, revelations emerged about the OMB director and acting chief of staff Mulvaney's role in the delay of the effort by lawyers in the administration to justify the delay, and the alarm. This is very important, that the alarm that the delay time caused within the administration. On January 2nd, newly unredacted Pentagon emails, which the House subpoenaed and the president blocked, raised serious concerns by the Trump administration officials. They were concerned about the legality of the president's hold on the aid to the Ukraine. On January 6th, former Trump National Security Advisor John Bolton said he would comply with a subpoena to testify, and that he has new relevant information. On January 13th, reports emerged the Russian government hacked the Ukrainian gas company as part of their ongoing effort to influence U.S. elections in support of President Trump. And just yesterday, the House committee, two of our chairmen here, Chairman Nadler of Judiciary, Chairman Schiff of Intelligence, Chairman Eliot Engel of Foreign Affairs, and Chairwoman Maloney of Government Reform, they released new evidence pursuant to a House subpoena. Lev Parnas, you know who that is, an associate of Rudy Giuliani, that further proves the president was a central player in the scheme to pressure Ukraine for his own benefit in the 2020 election. This is about the Constitution of the United States, and it's important for the president to know, and Putin to know, the American voters in America should decide who our president is, not Vladimir Putin in Russia. So today I'm very proud to present the managers who will bring the case, which we have great confidence in terms of impeaching the president and his removal. But this further evidence insists that, and we wouldn't be in this situation had we not waited insist that there be witnesses and that we see documentation. And now you see some of that change happening on the Senate side. I hope it does for the good of our country and to honor our Constitution. So today, on the floor, we'll pass a resolution naming the managers, as I mentioned, appropriating the funds for the trial and transmitting the articles of impeachment of the President of the United States for trying to influence a foreign government for his own personal and political benefit. Chair Adam Schiff of California, our lead manager, Chairman Schiff is, as you know, chair of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, is serving his 10th term in Congress. Excuse me. Before Congress, Mr. Schiff was a California state senator and served as a federal prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Los Angeles for 6 years, most notably prosecuting the first federal FBI agent ever to be indicted for espionage. Chairman Jerry Nadler, chair of the House Judiciary Committee, is serving his 15th term in Congress. Mr. Nadler served as the top Democrat on the Judiciary Subcommittee on Constitution, Civil Rights, and Civil Liberties for 13 years. Before Congress, Mr. Nadler served in the New York State Assembly for 16 years. Wow. Chair Zoe Lofgren, chair of the House Committee on House Administration, which has jurisdiction over federal elections, is a senior member of the House Judiciary Committee. Ms. Lofgren is serving her 13th term in Congress. This is Chairwoman Lofgren's third impeachment. As a Judiciary Committee staffer in the Nixon impeachment, as a member of the Judiciary Committee on the Clinton impeachment, and now as a manager in this impeachment of President Trump. Chair Hakeem Jeffries of New York. Chairman Hakeem Jeffries is the chair of the House Democratic Caucus and is currently serving his fourth term in Congress. He's a member of the House Judiciary Committee. Before being in Congress, he served in the Assembly of New York for 6 years, an accomplished litigator in private practice before running for elective office. Mr. Jeffries clerked for the Honorable Howard Baird, Jr. of New York District Court for the Southern District of New York. Congresswoman Val Demings of Florida. Congresswoman Val Demings is a member of both the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and the House Judiciary Committee. Ms. Demings serving her second term in Congress. Before Congress, Ms. Demings served as the Orlando Police Department for 27 years, part of that time as the first woman police chief in Orlando. Congressman Jason Crow of Colorado is a member of the House Armed Services Committee. Mr. Crow served our country, bravely as an Army Ranger in Iraq and Afghanistan. Before running for Congress, Mr. Crow was a respected litigator in private practice in Colorado. Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia of Texas. Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia is a member of the House Judiciary Committee. Before Congress, Ms. Garcia served in Texas State Senate previously. She was the director and presiding judge of the Houston Municipal System and was elected city controller. Ms. Garcia was later elected the first Hispanic and first woman to be elected in her own right to the Harris County Commissioner's Court. As you can see from these descriptions, the emphasis is on litigators. The emphasis is on comfort level in the courtroom. The emphasis is making the strongest possible case to protect and defend our Constitution, to seek the truth for the American people. I'm very proud and honored that these 7 members, distinguished members, have accepted this serious responsibility. Again, to protect and defend for the people, defending our democracy. When we leave here, a little bit later at noon, we'll go to the floor and pass the resolution naming the managers officially. But I wanted to say more about them here and to say that the decision to come down in favor of litigators is necessitated by the clear evidence that we should have witnesses and we should have documentation, and we have to make the strongest prosecution, not only of our very strong case, but of all the information that has come forth since. We're willing to take a few questions.
Speaker Pelosi.
Yes, sir.
If time has only strengthened your case, why did you rush to have a vote before Christmas? And, Mr. Chairman, why hold only public hearings for just 2 weeks? Well, couldn't you stretch this out longer in order to get this more information that you consider has only bolstered your case?
Well, I'll yield to the distinguished chairman, but I will say that we had a strong case for impeachment of the president and removal for the president. Anything more would be in terms of where we go in the Senate, and I'll yield to the chairman.
We've always felt a certain urgency about this impeachment, given that the president was trying to get foreign help in cheating in the next election. But as soon as we did take up and pass the articles, Mitch McConnell made it clear that he didn't want a trial in the Senate, that he didn't want to hear from witnesses, that he didn't want documents. And this time has given us the ability to show the American people the necessity of a fair trial, to expose the degree to which McConnell is working hand in hand with the subject of the impeachment, the president, to essentially turn what should be a trial into a sham. And that time has been, I think, very effective in not only bringing new evidence to light, and the evidence was already overwhelming, but also forcing senators to go on record. Do they want a fair trial, one that's fair to the president, but also fair to the American people, or are they going to participate in a cover-up? So I think it's been very effective, and as you've seen, additional evidence continues to come to light that not only has bolstered an already overwhelming case, but has also put additional pressure, I think, on the Senate to conduct a fair trial. And the last thing I'll say is Mr. McConnell has taken to saying that the Senate should only consider the closed record that comes from the House. And as if what the Senate is not a trial, but an appeal from a trial. But of course, the Senate, the framers had in mind a real trial with witnesses and evidence. And if McConnell makes this the first trial in history without witnesses, it will be exposed for what it is, and that is an effort to cover up for the president. Finally, some have suggested, as part of your question, why didn't we wait to get more testimony? Well, we have sought McGahn's testimony, Don McGahn, the president's lawyer, since April of last year. We still don't have a final court judgment. So, yes, we could have waited years to get testimony, further testimony from all the people the president has been obstructing. But essentially, that would completely negate the impeachment power. That is, allow the president, by virtue of obstruction, to prevent his own impeachment. And that was an unacceptable course, particularly when the whole object of the president's scheme was to cheat in the election, which is the ordinary mechanism for dealing with a corrupt presidency.
Mr. Chairman, let me just say, I was very discouraged to see Mitch McConnell sign on to a resolution dismissing the case. That, to me, dismissal is cover-up. Dismissal is cover-up. Do you want to speak to that, Jerry?
Let me add to that. There is an overwhelming case, beyond any reasonable doubt, that the president betrayed the country by withholding federal funds appropriated by Congress, breaking the law in doing so, in order to extort a foreign government into intervening in our election to embarrass or to try to embarrass a potential political opponent of his. There's overwhelming evidence of that. We couldn't wait because, some people said, well, let the election take care of it. He's trying to cheat in that election. So it is essential that we bring this impeachment to stop the president from trying to rig, not from trying, he tried, from rigging the next election, from conspiring with a foreign government as the Russian government attempted to rig our last election. The evidence is overwhelming. The latest evidence with Parnas and Giuliani makes it even more so. It made sense to wait a while as the more evidence piled up, but we have to proceed because the integrity of the election is at stake. Let me add one other thing. This is a test of the Constitution. The president's conduct violates the Constitution in every single way, trying to rig an election, stonewalling the Congress is saying no one may testify because I can have a cover-up despite Congress. But it's a test of the Constitution now. The Senate is intended by the Constitution to conduct a fair trial. The American people know that in a trial you permit witnesses. You present the evidence. If the Senate doesn't permit the introduction of all relevant witnesses...
We're listening to a press conference now after Speaker Pelosi named the 7 House managers here. We want to sneak on here really quickly. Andrea Mitchell, the 7, Texas, Florida, California, well represented. Colorado also in there. But this, as Speaker Pelosi said, she was looking for litigators.
And she's trying to emphasize that witnesses need to be called, and that if they're not called, it is a sham trial. This is a big bet for Pelosi, because by demanding John Bolton, they risk the Republicans saying, okay, bring on Hunter Biden. And do they really want to see Hunter Biden in the middle of a 2020 campaign being deposed, someone who is not used to being in that kind of spotlight?
You know, in Washington, we're used to a lot of jockeying for these big, high-profile slots here. I have to say, we have over a dozen House managers. In Clinton, it seemed like everybody got to be a House manager a lot of times. She really seemed to narrow things down. She didn't go over the top and saying, all right, you get a slot and you get a slot. She really did keep it tight.
And people who have proved themselves, like Val Demings, a former police chief from Orlando, Florida, who did so well in questioning Bob Mueller from Judiciary. People like Zoe Lofgren, who had been in all 3 impeachment attempts. Nixon as a staffer, and then, of course, Clinton, and now.
Look, in many ways, one of these people, Lindsey Graham, was a House manager that nobody ever heard of, and he turned that stint into something much bigger, so keep an eye on these 7 people. Look, that concludes our coverage for right now, but we're going to be coming back on the air to bring you the next steps in this process today. There's quite a bit. So here's what to expect around noon. The House will vote to approve the managers Nancy Pelosi just introduced, and then vote to send the actual articles to the Senate. And we will bring you all of that